Welcome in, everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive into Quincy Allen, an American serial killer. And you sent over some pretty in-depth documents about him. And yeah, I'm ready to jump in. What do you say?
I think it's a fascinating case. What makes Allen's case so unusual is that he didn't, really start down this road of crime because of a, troubled childhood or early violence.
It's not the typical background you see with these guys, huh?
Yeah, not at all.
So how did it all begin then?
Well, his criminal aspirations, they were kind of ignited while he was serving time for stealing a vehicle. He met a fellow inmate, and this guy claimed to have mafia connections.
Oh, wow.
Promised Allen a hitman job upon release.
So he's just sitting in prison, and this guy's like, hey, yeah, I got a job for you when you get out.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Was there any truth to that? Like,
Yeah.
did this inmate have ties to organized crime?
Well, it's really hard to say for certain. There's no evidence to suggest that, the inmate's claims were anything more than just empty boasts. But for Allen, who was maybe searching for a sense of purpose or belonging, I don't know, these words were enough to set him on a dangerous course.
It's like he was looking for direction, and this guy, even if he was lying, he gave him a path, a
Exactly.
very, very dark path.
Yeah.
So he gets out of prison, and then what?
So he latched on to this idea of becoming a hitman. And as soon as he was released, he purchased a shotgun.
Wow.
It was like he was preparing for a role in a movie, except the stakes were, all too real.
Yeah, this was real life.
Yes. And that brings us to one of the most disturbing aspects of this case, the practice killing.
Okay.
Allen decided he needed to, hone his skills before taking on any assignments.
You wanted to be ready. Wow.
So he chose James White, a homeless man in Finley Park, as his target.
That's awful. So you mentioned that White actually survived being shot twice, right?
Yes.
Was he able to provide any insights into like Allen's demeanor during the attack?
Yeah.
It's chilling to think that he was able to just walk away from this incident and continue down this path.
It is. Well, what's fascinating from a psychological perspective is that Allen's actions seem to mirror a phenomenon observed in some serial killers known as the McDonald triad.
Okay, the McDonald triad.
Yeah, the triad suggests that certain behaviors in childhood, like bedwetting, fire setting, and cruelty to animals, can be indicators of a predisposition to violence later in life.
Right.
Right.
So you're saying there's some parallels here.
I think so, yeah. The practice killing, even though it failed, was a form of testing the boundaries, of desensitizing himself to violence.
Yeah.
It's like a horrifying real-life experiment.
Absolutely, yeah.
Precisely. And while Allen didn't exhibit the classic McDonald triad behaviors in his youth, the practice killing could be interpreted as a similar type of behavioral rehearsal, a way of, preparing himself for more serious acts of violence.
Yeah. So this was practice for him. And then just 3 days later, it wasn't practice anymore.
Wow.
This was the real deal.
Yes, the murder of Dale Yvonne Hall marks a significant escalation in Allen's criminal behavior. Not only did he shoot her multiple times, but he also tried to conceal his crime by setting her body on fire.
Yeah, the document you sent me describes the crime scene as particularly gruesome. It's like he was trying to erase any trace of his victim.
Yeah, the use of fire to destroy evidence is a common tactic among criminals. But it's interesting to note that Allen chose this method in his, first actual murder. It suggests a degree of premeditation and a desire to avoid capture. Yeah.
So it seems like Allen was learning and adapting as he went along. Each crime became more brutal, more calculated.
Yeah.
He wasn't content with just stealing cars anymore. He was embracing this dark fantasy of becoming a ruthless hitman.
Right, and that fantasy continued to fuel his actions in the weeks that followed. Less than a month after killing Dale Yvonne Hall, Allen found himself in a confrontation at a Texas Roadhouse restaurant. The details of the altercation are unclear, but it seems Allen felt threatened or disrespected in some way.
Okay, so what happened? What happened at the Texas Roadhouse?
From what I gathered, Allen ended up fatally shooting Jedediah Har, a friend of an employee who tried to intervene in the dispute.
So this was another murder, another victim.
Yes.
Wow.
And this incident is particularly interesting because it seems to deviate from the calculated hitman-like persona that Allen was cultivating. The Texas Roadhouse shooting appears impulsive, driven by rage or a sudden sense of, threat.
It's like it was more personal.
Yeah,
Hmm.
the randomness of it is unsettling.
Yeah.
It's as if Allen was operating on two different levels. The cold-blooded killer seeking out targets, and the volatile individual reacting to perceived slights.
Right? It's like he was two different people.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this unpredictability becomes even more apparent in the events that followed the shooting. Instead of fleeing the scene, Allen chased Brian Marquis, the employee he initially confronted, to his home and set his porch on fire.
He set his porch on fire.
Yeah.
Wow. It's like his rage just spiraled out of control.
It did. It's difficult to say with certainty, but what we do know is that Allen's violence was becoming more indiscriminate, more chaotic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he went on to set fire to several vehicles connected to Texas Roadhouse employees
Yeah.
in the days after the shooting. It's like he was sending a message, cross me and there will be consequences.
Exactly. And tragically, this wave of violence culminated in the double murder during a gas station robbery in Dobson, North Carolina, just days later.
Okay, so this was this robbery, which claimed the lives of Richard Calvin Hawks and Robert Shane Roush. This ultimately led to Allen's arrest.
Yeah.
August 14th, 2002.
That's right.
It's a chilling thought that if not for these murders, his spree might have continued.
Yeah.
I mean, in just over a month, Allen had gone from car thief to serial killer, leaving a trail of destruction and heartbreak in his wake.
That's right.
But what's striking is that even after his capture, Allen's story doesn't end there.
No, it doesn't.
There's more.
Oh, yeah. Even within the confines of prison, Allen's capacity for violence remained undimmed. And that's where we'll pick up when we return. We'll delve into Allen's time on death row, a period marked by a daring escape attempt and a legal battle that would drag on for years.
So we left off with Quincy Allen's arrest.
Mm-hmm.
And you sent me some information about his time on death row and even in a maximum security prison. This guy, his story, it's just wild. It's still one of violence and defiance.
Yeah, it really is. In December 2009, while on death row, Allen, along with another inmate, Mikal Dean Muddy, they orchestrated an attack on a correctional officer. It was a brazen escape attempt. And what's even more chilling is the level of planning involved.
Okay, so they were planning this. They weren't just acting on impulse.
No, not at all.
So how do they even, how did they pull this off? They're in prison, maximum security. I mean, how do you even begin to plan something like this?
Well, they managed to fashion makeshift weapons
Okay.
from materials they scavenged within the prison.
Wow. So what are we
It's
talking
a
about here? Like
really-
shanks?
Yeah, they stripped metal from air ducts, meticulously shaping it into shivs.
Wow.
It really speaks to their desperation, their resourcefulness, and, a chilling disregard for the consequences.
Yeah, they were serious.
They were. Their target was Nathan Sasser, a correctional officer.
Okay. And what happened during the attack? I can't imagine what Officer Sasser went through.
Well, Allen and Madi lured Officer Sasser to the basketball court under false pretenses.
So they tricked him.
Yeah, they ambushed him, stabbing him multiple times.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It was brutal. But despite his severe injuries, Officer Sasser, he fought back with remarkable courage, ultimately thwarting their escape plan.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, he was able to fight them off.
He was.
Yeah.
He was. It's a real testament to his bravery that he was able to defend himself against two attackers.
Wow.
His story is a stark reminder of the dangers faced by correctional officers every day.
Absolutely. I mean, most people, when they think of prison, they think of the inmates, but they forget about the people who work there, the guards, the staff who are putting their lives on the line.
Yeah, that's right. And Officer Sasser, he suffered both physical and emotional scars. He developed PTSD, was plagued by anxiety attacks,
Oh, wow.
and sadly was forced to retire due to the trauma.
I mean, I can't even imagine.
It's a tragic reminder that the ripple effects of violence extend far beyond the, immediate victims.
Absolutely, yeah. So after they failed to overpower Officer Sasser, what happened? I mean, did they give up?
No, they were determined to escape. They tried to scale the prison fence, but their efforts were futile.
I see.
Frustrated and fueled by adrenaline, they unleashed their anger on the common area, destroying everything they could.
Okay.
It's a chilling reminder that their capacity for violence was relentless.
Yeah. And you mentioned the guards had to use tear gas and rubber bullets to subdue them.
They did, yeah.
It must have been just chaos. I mean, it's like, you think of prison as this very controlled environment, But this sounds like something out of a movie.
Yeah, it underscores the, unpredictable nature of such environments. Even with stringent security measures, violence can erupt unexpectedly.
Yeah. So what were the repercussions for Alan and Marty after this whole incident?
Well, they were stripped of all privileges, no more outside recreation, no visitation rights, no phone calls, not even access to, canteen items. They were essentially placed in complete isolation.
Wow, so they were in solitary confinement.
Basically, yeah. And, you mentioned that they were later transferred to another facility along with all other death row inmates in South Carolina.
Right, right. In 2017, they were moved to Kirkland Correctional Institution in Columbia.
That's right.
Okay. So we've been talking a lot about Alan, but what about Marty, his accomplice in all this? What happened to him?
Well, that's a significant development. In August of 2024, the South Carolina Supreme Court announced that Madi's execution is scheduled for 2025.
Oh, wow.
This stems from his role in the murder of Captain James Myers.
So while Alan's story takes a different turn, his accomplice in this violent escape attempt, he's facing the ultimate punishment.
That's right. But let's rewind a bit, and delve into Alan's trials and sentencing. After pleading guilty to the 4 murders, Alan was initially sentenced to death.
Okay.
His execution was scheduled for January 8th, 2010.
So after this string of violence,
Yeah.
justice was finally being served.
Well, not quite. Alan's legal team, as is common in death penalty cases, they filed a stay of execution just hours after the verdict.
Oh, wow.
The South Carolina Supreme Court accepted the motion, and a new execution date was never set.
So it sounds like there was a lot more to come.
Yeah, the legal battle continued.
I mean, what were the grounds for the appeal? Was there new evidence, or were they challenging the death penalty itself?
Well, it's likely that Allen's defense team employed various legal strategies, perhaps focusing on, mitigating circumstances, potential flaws in his original trial, or even questioning the constitutionality of the death penalty in South Carolina.
Hmm. So it sounds like Allen's case became kind of intertwined with this larger national debate about capital punishment.
Yeah, that's a crucial observation. Death penalty cases often become battlegrounds for these, broader societal issues, sparking intense debates about justice, morality, and the role of the state in punishing its citizens.
Yeah. Big questions, right?
Big questions.
So how did Allen's appeals play out? Was he successful in overturning his sentence?
He was, to a certain extent. In July of 2022, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, they overturned his death sentence. And then just last year, in July 2024, Allen accepted a plea deal that reduced his sentence to life imprisonment.
So instead of facing execution, he'll spend the rest of his days behind bars. I mean, does that mean he ultimately escaped the ultimate punishment?
Well, that's a complex question, and it raises philosophical questions about what constitutes, true justice. Some might argue that life imprisonment is a harsher sentence, forcing the individual to confront their actions each day. Others believe it allows for the possibility of rehabilitation or at least some, semblance of a life.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's a lot to think about. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground here.
Sure.
A crime spree, a death sentence, a daring escape attempt, years of legal battles, and ultimately a life sentence. It's hard to believe that this all stems from a man who initially just stole a car.
What does it all mean? How do we even begin to process a story like this?
Well, perhaps the most crucial thing to remember is that amidst the shocking details and legal complexities, there are real people whose lives were, forever altered by Allen's actions.
That's right. Dale Yvonne Hall, Jedediah Harr, Richard Calvin Hawks, Robert Shane Roche, and Officer Sasser. Their stories deserve to be remembered. Their families and loved ones continue to grapple with the pain and loss caused by Allen's crimes.
And beyond the immediate victims, there's a broader impact on communities, on our sense of safety, and on the very fabric of our society.
Right.
These cases, they force us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature and the potential for darkness that exists within us all. But even amidst this darkness, there are glimmers of hope.
The resilience of Officer Sasser, the dedication of the legal teams fighting for justice, the ongoing efforts to understand and prevent violence, these all speak to the enduring human spirit.
Man, it's a lot to take in, isn't it? This whole deep dive into Quincy Allen, I mean, it's taken us through a whirlwind, hasn't it? Shock, horror, sadness, even a glimmer of hope in there.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen the dark side of humanity, but we've also seen incredible courage and resilience.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. It's a stark reminder that, the human experience, it's a mix of light and shadow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Alan's story, it's a cautionary tale. It's a reminder of what can happen when rage and ambition spiral out of control. But it also makes you think about the choices we all make every day, right?
Yeah.
The paths we choose, the impact we have on the world around us.
It's almost like Alan's story is like a mirror reflecting this duality of human nature, right? I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
we all have the capacity for good and evil.
That's a powerful insight. And maybe by confronting these dark stories, by really digging into, the motivations and the circumstances that lead people down these destructive paths, maybe we gain a deeper understanding not just of criminals like Alan, but of
Yeah,
ourselves.
it's like looking into the abyss and seeing that potential for darkness within each of us.
Exactly. But recognizing that potential, it's not about giving in to fear or despair.
Right.
It's about empowering ourselves to make conscious choices, to cultivate empathy, and to try to build a world where violence and hatred have less power.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that Alan's case got tied up in the whole debate about capital punishment. Did his life sentence instead of execution, I mean, did that change your perspective on the death penalty at all?
It's a question that always sparks a lot of debate. The death penalty it's such a complex issue. It brings up profound moral and ethical implications.
Yeah.
Some people believe it's just punishment for heinous crimes. Others say it's inhumane, that it's irreversible, that it's potentially flawed.
And Alan's case definitely adds another layer to that conversation, right?
It does, yeah. I mean, he was sentenced to death, but ultimately that was reduced to life in prison. So, does that suggest that even in the most extreme cases, there might be room for a different approach to justice?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does. It
Yeah.
raises some really important questions about the goals of our justice system. Is it just about retribution? Or is there room for rehabilitation, for the
Right.
possibility of redemption?
Yeah.
These are big questions that society is still wrestling with, and cases like Allen's, they force us to confront them head on.
Well, we've covered a lot today.
Yeah.
Quincy Allen's life, his crimes, from car thief to serial killer, death row, that crazy escape attempt, and finally, life in prison. I mean, it's a story that's both fascinating and disturbing.
Yeah.
A real reminder of how complex human nature is and the challenges we face as a society.
Yeah. It's a story that stays with you. And while it'd be easy to just label Alan a monster and move on, I think there's more to be gained by trying to understand him,
Right.
the forces that shaped him, the choices he made, and the ripple effects of his actions.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life and crimes of Quincy Allen, I'm left with this question, what can we learn from this? What insights can we take away that might help us, navigate our own lives and maybe even build a better future for ourselves and for future generations?
That's a great question. I think the most important takeaway is recognizing that we all have that capacity for both darkness and light within us.
Hmm.
Quincy Allen's story, it shows us the potential consequences when rage and ambition take over. But it also highlights the power of resilience,
Yeah.
the importance of empathy, and the hope for a world where tragedies like this become less and less common, less impactful.
Thank you for joining us on this journey, everyone. We hope this deep dive has given you some things to think about. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember that even in the darkest times, we have that human capacity for hope and healing.